Ever think you might need a little more out of life? Why not try Chasing Diamonds with Andy Caldley, a podcast aimed at bringing out the extraordinary nature of the human experience and the curiosity, wonder, and creativity that drives it. It is his most sincere hope that today's episode tickles your fancy. So now, without further ado, here is your host, Andy Caldley.
Thanks so much, Ron. Joshua Rich is an entirely self-taught performing pianist who works out of Northern Virginia. I met him recently at some local shows and was very impressed by his elegant and expressive talent. As it turns out, he's also a really interesting guy, so it only felt natural to have him on the show to discuss the curious occupation of being a working musician, a discussion that I am always ready to have considering my musical background. How are you, Joshua? Welcome to the show.
I'm great, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
So I just wanted to get started. You are, as I mentioned earlier, a more interesting guy than most people will meet. You have been playing music in the DC metro area for how long now?
It's probably a good 10 to 15 years.
So how did that get started?
Well, that's a good question. Kind of a long story. I am originally from up in New England, and I at one point went out to California, and I was in LA and also San Francisco, and eventually ended up down here, and this is sort of a second home to me now. So, yeah, that's the short answer.
Okay, so what you, as I mentioned earlier, you're entirely self-taught.
Mm-hmm.
Did you start on the piano?
Actually, no, I started on the clarinet. I always tell this story because it's always so interesting to me what you know when you don't know what you know. When I was a kid, we were all enrolled in lessons, and my lesson for whatever reason was the clarinet. We never it was just sort of always, everything was just assigned to us. And so I remember going to the music school and sitting in the teacher's studio and being miserable and looking at a piano that he had. And I'll never forget that I was always longing for the piano. I'll never forget that feeling. And I didn't really think about it at all as like, oh, why am I sitting here like longing for a piano? And then sometime later, I feel like it was about a year that I took clarinet. It taught me how to read treble clef. That's all I remember doing. It also taught me how hard reeds are to keep from chipping and how hard it is to make music on a woodwind. And then I was sitting with my dad at a party, and I was sitting on his lap, and he was an amateur pianist. I can talk more about that later. His brother actually was a successful sideman in the 50s and 60s, I've since learned, who also taught himself an instrument. He taught himself trumpet, which is kind of cool because I'm kind of the black sheep of my family. So it's always been cool to find some link to other people who are in the arts.
All right, I feel you.
So he was playing the piano, and he put my hand on a C chord, which is just 3 notes on the piano for anybody listening who doesn't know what a C chord is. And I began playing, and I don't remember, whether it was that night or the next day, but I literally just began playing and composing and singing the pianos from that age on, from 8 years old on. So, yeah, I've never had a lesson, and that's, yeah, so yes.
So being around, so when I'm self-taught as well with the bass guitar, and what I noticed was I had so much time, being that it was my own, I knew it was my own drive that would allow me to play the instrument. If I wanted to, I had to work at it. So what I noticed was when I was about 16, I couldn't really play with people my age because they only had time to play in between school. But also, I feel that the fact that lesson, like once per week, kind of looms over your head, you think to yourself, that's when I have to work at it. Mm-hmm. It's that point in the week. And at the time, I was obsessed with Rush, and I would just desperately try to play Rush all day, Geddy Lee's bass parts. My fingers would get horrible blisters, and they'd get so wore out. But as a result, I was 16. All my friends are now in high school bands, and I couldn't really... I felt that I expected better from them. And so as a result, I started playing with people much older than me.
Right.
Did you ever get a similar feeling like that?
Well, I was thinking about my answer while you were talking because I always want to word this in a way that really represents the spirit of what I'm saying. I'm really gifted at the piano. I have a very, very magical gift. Not only that I'm totally self-taught and I didn't have any idea other than the longing for the piano and my clarinet lessons. I never thought like, oh, I really want to learn piano, or I didn't ever see my dad playing and think, oh, I really want to play piano. Now I can't imagine my life without the piano, but before the age of 8, there was no connection to music. That's part of the answer. The other part is, no, I've never experienced that. We talked before the podcast started about our mutual our mutual enjoyment or appreciation of being self-taught people. I never wanted or felt a need for lessons or needed any motivation. I just once I began playing the piano, it's always been like breathing to me. It really feels like an extension of my hands. I feel like whenever I touch the keys, it's just it's like more of my body. And people who see me play and people who hear my music say very much that they experience me just being very one with the instrument and very connected. And I then began kind of a solo career. And recently I've begun putting more musicians around me to fill out my music more, which I'm really excited about doing.
But at the start, it was just kind of yourself.
Right. And I've done so much solo piano playing, and I've worn the hat of piano bar player, background music player, party player, accompanist, music director, all these other jobs I taught myself how to do. So I've always been the solo pianist. So I've never really, felt that. But I will say also, I hope that this doesn't come out sounding egotistical, but I mean, when I play with other people, even when they're really, really good, which I try to find people who are talented and who are gifted and who really are feeling the music, it's still something that I have to kind of guide them along as far as my improvisational ability and my relaxed approach to music, because many people, even if they are talented, they still have this sort of rigidity of how you express a song. I was talking to this guy that plays sax with me now named Vince Harrison Sr., who's a very talented guy, and it was very affirming because he was talking about how he went to this jazz jam and he couldn't believe how strict everyone was trying to recreate the music. They were like trying to play Train's intro exactly how Coltrane did it. And he was like, what the hell are you doing? So I've always experienced that at jazz jams. I go in, I'm like ready to just go crazy on the piano, and they're all like, why aren't you doing the intro that Duke Ellington did exactly the way Duke Ellington did it before we start this chart? And I'm like, because it's jazz and we're all supposed to be
Yeah.
So I found that in my playing that I'm looking for musicians now to play with me, but I have to make sure that they're open and willing to create the music in a way that's not predefined, kind of. So yeah,
I feel that music is often, and this is, take this in whatever way you want for those who do not perform, but I feel that music really is a language. And just like a language, everybody can know how to do the job, but everybody speaks different languages. So often you can get, a couple really talented musicians together, but through them they can't speak to each other. And finding, like, I'm very fortunate, the band I'm with now, Havana, I've never played with people who can pick up on your concepts as fast as they can. Anything you hum, they by ear, they can tell immediately what you're playing. You can tell them C Mixolydian, and they're on it. So theoretically, they're very advanced. You can just, even if you do the childish thing and just say, okay, look at my fingers while you're on the fretboard, they will pick it up almost immediately.
Right.
They are very tuned in. We're all very tuned into each other, and it's no wonder why we create such successful, enjoyable music. I think is that reason that we can all speak to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point that it's a language and that you can only speak a language as well or as fully. We talked about this too before we started about our love of language. And I guess I've never thought about it specifically that way, but now that I think about it that way, that makes a lot of sense. And you're expressing yourself. And to me, I think the key for me is finding musicians who feel my way, which is that I don't think about. I'm so fluent at the piano. I mean, and at this point of my career, I feel so on top of my craft that but I don't ever feel like I really ever thought about it. I mean, I literally just started playing when I was 8. I started composing when I was 17. I started getting jobs in piano bars, even though I was underage, and would get chased out when they realized I was actually not 21. And I've just always been kind of like doing jobs that I shouldn't have been able to do because I hadn't been given any training. So I think that's what I mean when I need to find musicians who like that. Like they're good enough. They can express the language really fully, but they're open to how you might want to be expressing it. And they're out there. And I think that's, we were also talking about live music. I mean, I think there's a real new surge of live music happening again in this country and really probably everywhere. Of just because I think the more we get plugged in and connected to all of our social media and all of our iPods and iPads and phones, we I think luckily, blessedly, sort of subconsciously seek a connection. The pendulum swings back to wanting to have a connection, and so live music becomes popular. Like in the piano bar last week, this girl was there from France, and she had a Polaroid camera, and I had a Polaroid camera when I was a kid, and here she is, like it's 20 years, whatever, however many years later, she's like doing the same thing I did. It looks a little different, but it's the same technology. Like, why do people want to have a camera that you have to wait for the picture to come out? But people, you know what I mean? So the pendulum keeps swinging.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
It's like we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Right.
I think it's just guys like you and I, when we see the possibilities offered by modern, like this, what we're doing right now, my entire setup, cost XYZ amounts of hundreds of dollars, but it was enough for me to be able to purchase over the course of 2 weeks. And now I'm live, and this can be accessed by any human with the internet connection. I think enterprising people look at that and they realize, wow, that's a huge... Before, the idea was that in order to get on the radio, you had to impress a record company enough so that they would pay you to record your material. But now you can do it on your own. My band does our own recording. Fortunately, we have a guy who doesn't mind spending however much money on the equipment required, but we have produced all our, he took classes on YouTube producing, I think, on Logic, and it's just...
That's funny.
It's just so much easier now, and I think enterprising people see that and they go, okay, let me have a go.
Well, I think, technology, I don't think people should be scared of it. I think technology is really awesome, and it's always this way. The society always is inventing, and that's what's so amazing. It's how you use it. So on the one hand, you can look at technology and say, yeah, there's like 3,000 more people that are going to put CDs out on YouTube, that most of which may not be, the best quality. But out of that 3,000, there's going to be one that wouldn't have been able to, that the quality is really good, and he or she will get heard or seen. My daughter, she's a teenager, and she's always introducing me to people that I would never have heard of before on SoundCloud or YouTube. And so, it's again that balance. Like it provides. So you're very bright and you're very interesting and you're creating something that's the content that's worth being out there. There might be 2,900 other people out there creating their podcasts that are not necessarily something that's going to last or be worthwhile. But out of that comes one or two that's really cool. So it is amazing. I think we're living through some of the most amazing times ever that people will look back on and go, wow.
No doubt.
I mean, it's true. Like I release an album. I drop an album, whatever it's called, really, because I send recorded music to a company, and within a day or two, that music can be downloaded in all these different formats, and that's remarkable. I mean, that's just amazing. Like you used to have to like burn a CD for someone or share,
Sure.
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Press a record,
I had one of those actually. Yeah.
A record press.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I had my first album was actually an actual album. So.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And when did that come out?
That was a while ago now. It's called Discovery. I wrote the music while I was on a cruise ship. I was on the Princess Cruise Lines for a few months. And that's another example where I was put in. I've been so blessed to learn on the job. So like you probably, I like to learn by just being thrown in and say, okay, good luck. I auditioned and I was supposed to just be in the sort of trio band that would have just done like jazz standards or whatever while people were drinking, but I got put in the house band, which was a fuller, had a couple of saxes, a couple of maybe a flute, and it was just a fuller band, and we were playing for the shows. And when I first got there, the drummer was like, "Why are what are you doing here? You're not necessarily good enough." But they had to use me because they had made a mistake and they needed me. And I just learned so much on that ship, and I learned how to use a click track, which was like, what the hell is a click? What is this?
Yeah.
So that was another example I was talking earlier about, just learning on the job and always being above my level and having to achieve that. I learned how to read music on the ship. I learned how to read bass clef. The singer, this is I never will forget this woman. So I wish I remembered her name, but she was a singer. She needed to sing Ave Maria, and I needed to accompany her.
Okay.
She hands me the music. I'm like, I need chords. I don't know what you're doing. And it was just one of those things. Like I had just never taken the time to really learn how to read.
Yeah.
I could read chords and I could kind of read treble clef, but I played mostly by ear up to that point. So the charts I had to learn to read, but those were still mostly chords and you could get away with it. She's like, don't worry, take your time. And I did. I spent 2 or 3 days on that ship just looking at that bass clef, and I taught myself bass clef, and I performed the piece for her. And I've since been a professional accompanist for many years without any problem, and have been told by people that I'm one of the best accompanists they've ever heard. Not that I want to make a career out of that, but that's been a way to pay the bills. And that was just another example of where like I had to learn, just like I had to learn stick shift when I was a teenager and a cop came up behind us and I had to put it in gear or he would have stopped us, and I didn't actually have a license at the time. So yeah.
So what are some of your inspirations as a piano? Like the first time I saw you, we were in was it Amore's Cafe Amore in Vienna, and there was something very romantic about your playing. So where did you just get that from yourself? But that aside, what are some artists that you take inspiration from specifically?
Well, I mean, the Beatles, I would just listen to their albums over and over and over again on the floor with my headphones as loud as possible. I fell in love with them. I'm really blessed that my dad, for as much as my parents didn't really support me being a prodigy, they really literally ignored it. They actually didn't do anything to support it or promote me or give me any help or in any way get me out there, which is part of my story, part of why I kind of floundered for a while and sort of didn't believe in myself. And I've had to really learn to have a lot of confidence and believe in myself on my own, taught myself to feel that way, my own therapy. But I do like the blessing that he was a musician and he loved music, and he had all these different, he had an old fake book because, his brother had played, and he had played in a couple of bands when he was growing up, jazz bands. So he had an actual fake book, which is actually a notebook full of music that actually was just sketched out by musicians and passed around, and they were just faking the arrangements, which then became somebody saying, hey, you know what, I think we should put the real arrangements of these songs together, and that's what became the real book. And now there's a real book for everything, but it's only supposed to be a real book for jazz. But I had an actual fake book, so I learned all these songs from the 1910, 20, 30s, 40s. He had all these show songs. He had Rodgers and Hart, so I learned all these show tunes. He had folk music. He had the Beatles, and then I just bought Elton John, Billy Joel. So I had just this array of all the, and then I was listening to Aerosmith too, and Kiss, and late 70s, 80s stuff. Just all these great. So I'm blessed that he had all that going on, and but when I say inspiration, I always, people have always said when they hear me play, they think of Mozart and Beethoven. So I know I hear that and I feel that very much. I love Mozart's playfulness. I totally resonate with Beethoven's romantic. I think he had a really romantically challenging life, and I totally resonate with that. And then the Beatles. And I love James Taylor. I love Paul Simon. I like Dave Matthews. I kind of, over the last 10 or 15 years, I don't feel like I'm inspired as much by people. I feel like I kind of got my grounding and but I listen, anything I listen to now, I like a lot there's a lot of really cool rap stuff that I like as far as rhythm. I like some of the stuff out today, the rhythm of the melody will be, they'll alter it, sort of like Stevie Wonder would do, where they'll take a word that has 2 or 3 syllables in them and it'll be pronounced not where you think it should be.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably the Beatles and Mozart and the Rodgers and Hart and Gershwin and the kind of old school jazz from the 30s and 40s is probably, just the perfection of those songs. And you said romantic. That's interesting. I think I'm coming into my own really as a performer. I've had all these different incarnations. And as I've gotten more confident, I think that I'm getting in touch with the essence of what I really am, which is not necessarily just that I'm a gifted pianist, a talented singer, and a talented composer, hopefully, but that I feel what I do. And a lot of performers aren't necessarily of the heart. So I've always compared myself to a Stevie Wonder, where you just you can't watch Stevie Wonder and not feel happy.
Yeah.
You can't watch, the way Springsteen can be really into his stuff. the Indigo Girls. I mean, just anybody with real heart. And that's what I think people get from my music, which I'm really sensing now. Like, wow, because I've recently begun getting away from the piano and just doing singing without the piano as a variety. Just
interesting.
To get to be. And I just like, okay, I'm not going to be at the piano, so I guess it won't be as strong. And people will be like, oh, and people are just as happy. They love to still. It's me. It's not necessarily the piano per se. It's my own. And I do. I mean, I have a pretty romantic soul. So.
Well, that's always good. I agreed with you earlier. You said that you, as you go on, find less and less inspiration with other musicians' work, and it more comes from your own heart. I've reached a similar point where what I tend to get out of listening to other music in translating to my own music tends to be more like patterns. Like I'll see a song and I say, I like the way that song is arranged. Nothing, and I'll write a song with a similar arrangement in terms of the structure, verse, chorus, etc. But I'm at that moment too, where my inspiration more comes from my own life, my own experiences, or some piece of music that I have played or stumbled upon on my own. You're at that same point?
Yeah, and I think that's a part of. I mean, I think you're kind of mature beyond your years, actually, because I think people in general in their teens or 20s, they're kind of finding themselves, and they do have to listen to a lot. And you listen to them, and they're like, "Hey, check out this, riff I just learned," and you're like, find your own voice, like make your own. And so that's cool that you're already there. I think that the more confident you get, and the more aware of yourself that you get, the inspiration is more like, oh, that's a cool figure that person did. How can I put it in my song? Or like, I want to write a song right now where I have a rap, a rap verse, and then I have my chorus. Like, I love that kind of thing that happens. But I don't hear that and go, oh, I want to do what they did. It's a different inspiration. And I do. I think that just comes from being more mature and more grown up and more knowing and more confident knowing who you are.
Yeah, knowing
I'm very, very comfortable in my skin right now as a writer. I feel really confident about my writing and my singing and my playing. And I know what I want to do and I know what I want to say. And I don't have any doubt really. Like I had 6 song ideas that I finally fleshed out into songs last night, and I finished them. And I'm pretty confident about all of them as
wow.
good pieces. And yeah, I have, in addition to all of my music and in addition to everything released, I have another ton of songs that are all these little kids who haven't gotten out of the house and been able to be out in the world yet. And then on top of that, I have other sort of song ideas that are these little, I guess to follow my analogy, they'd be little embryos, but this is just starting to sound kind of weird, but that haven't really been, hatched into the world, into being. So it feels good to get some of those done and out, and then I just need to record them. I'm in a pretty prolific time right now, and it's exciting. So it's kind of a combination of performing all these songs that have been released for a while, but not, I haven't been out there doing it as much as I want to physically, and now I can more. Because I was talking about how my daughter, it's kind of been a little bit of a challenge to find time to do it full time.
Well, I can imagine. And
also make a living. And then I have a set of songs that I never released that I wanted to. And then I just remembered another song I need to remember to record. Actually, I'm going to write down right now that I remembered in Bikram in my exercise today. Just another set of songs that are just like these, on my phone. New song idea.
Those, I hear a lot on the comedians talk about how, for them, or at least the comedians that I tend to listen to, tend to be very involved in their own creative process. The sort of discarding of their hour, like they'll perfect an hour and then they'll enjoy it for just ever so slight amount of time, then they throw it away. They got to start over because that's the loss. So when you're writing you've got these, it's almost like you have, I don't want to call it an assembly line, that sounds very industrial, but
that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, like you have songs that are old and then songs that are being made. Is that a case of you go up there, you write the song, you finish the song in your house, and then put the finer touches on it, performing it live as other people give you feedback on them?
No, because I'm not at that point really.
Okay.
I've never really been at the point where I needed to be shaped by an audience, and I never mean these answers to sound egotistical. 'Cause I'm like the least egotistical.
Yeah, I can vouch for that gentleman. He's very, very, very calm and relaxed.
Yeah, my humility is almost a curse in a way because I think I've been too humble in my life. But I'm a good writer. It's more like what's exciting for me now is when I do a song. It's funny to think of the stand-ups because I think it's similar. And I've talked to comics. They'll say like they'll get a riff in their head, like they'll get an idea, and that's just like a song idea, and then they'll flesh it out. And they'll either go, yeah, this works, and then sometimes they have to perform it to see like, well, how does it really hit the audience? But they kind of know whether they like it or not. So I have a lot of songs. I mean, I always loved the song I just wrote. Now what it is like when I get up to perform. Now that I'm finally performing full time. It's exciting to see whether just how people respond to it because they're always good songs, but is it a kind of song that people want to buy and listen to a lot, or is it just like, yeah, that's a really good song, but it doesn't hit them?
Or maybe if that song hits them perhaps it invokes these emotions that you didn't really imagine invoking.
Mm-hmm.
Like being that a comedian is right there and it's just him speaking and he has to feel the crowd, he has to read the crowd. You being just alone singing and playing the piano have a very similar responsibility to be able to try to feel the energy that's coming back from the crowd and interpreting it depending on what you're playing.
Well, and I'm really lucky. I mean, I get a lot of feedback for things I write that I wouldn't have expected. We were talking about my song Serenade that you recorded, you said, and that when I first did that, I mean, it's just one of many, many, many songs that I have released that I haven't been performing. And I would have thought that was as good as any other song, but that song particularly has been really resonated by people. People have really resonated with that. A piano player I know actually liked it so much he wanted to learn it and perform it, which is just a really big thrill.
That was the song that I kind of like. I heard at Cafe Amore. I was like, "Oh, hold on one second."
I mean, and that's awesome. And so that's really what it's like when I go live. It's like I remember Elton John saying he's always trying to write the perfect 3-chord song. I'm always hoping that every song I perform will have a reaction like that, but it can't. It just is not. It's just not physically possible. I understand that. I accept it, but I never believe in it, and I'm always stubbornly hoping that every song will be resonated with, and I just humbly accept when they're not. But it doesn't mean they're not good songs. It just means okay,
of course,
yeah. And so you just are always looking. So it's a thrill every time I can do something new. And just go, okay, it's basically like you've baked this kid, you've created this thing. You're just, well, because they're like kids to me, these songs. And you're just like presenting it to the world and saying, what do you think? And when people really resonated enough with like, oh my God, I want to go download that, or I want to hear that again, or I want to play it. That's because I mean, one of the measures of my success is as a musician, you're always looking for like, when have you made it? Like I'll do a concert. So I'll do a concert and someone will come along and say, are you famous? And I'm like, I don't know, because you never know how well known you are.
Certainly.
So what I look at are like, what are the markers of, and one of the markers to me of success is a song that is popular enough that many, many people want to sing. Like we want to do a Beatles song, or we want to do a song by, whoever. You wanted to, learn Rush songs, that you can create a song that people resonate with enough that they want that song as part of their like, lexicon of, so that to me is one of the markers. So when this guy wanted to play my song, I was like, wow, and he plays at a piano bar that I play at. So I'm like, okay, now I need to come in and I need to request it, because that's one of my dreams, just to have a song so well known that just alongside Piano Man and Uptown Girl and The Longest Time, For the Love of God, is also a Joshua Rich song. Like, can you play any Joshua Rich? That would be a real marker of success for me. So,
well, that's a good point to aim at. Aim at the sun and you'll land among the stars. I tend to set my up, and I'm just listening to how you go about performing live, because performing live music, for those who have never felt real like concerto, like a real coming together, it makes all of the struggles that come naturally from trying to make your living through music, it makes it all worth it. And so for me, I tend to be very, very involved in making sure. And I tend to do my writing this way as well. And I tend to, being that I'm in a band of 5 people, we work on each other's work. I tend to
That's cool.
take other people's work and try to put my take on it so that it fits in the overall. My idea is that the set in itself is like a journey, and that we tend to do our writing in a way that from the first song to the last song is a song in itself,
Right.
in the sense that the movements of energy, the dynamics reflect the way you sculpt the dynamics of an individual song to hit an effect with people like that. So we won't write a song unless it can clearly fit in that. Or if, say we do write a song that we feel doesn't really have much of a room in that particular set,
Right.
we'll begin to write other songs to give that one its own home as well.
That's a very thoughtful and full way of looking at what you're creating. That's great. That's that's kind of an old-fashioned way of putting together albums, actually.
Maybe it's like not for for the vast majority of my youth, it was all rock and roll, but like just recently, I studied opera. Just because I was
going to say, that's a very operatic way of doing it, too.
So I think maybe that had something to do with it, like the power of seeing, combining theater and music into a way that, carries the energy so well that by the end you're...
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what I try to do with the music. And it's challenging, but like we did a show at the Old Shebeen in Fairfax, and I'm
going to check that place out. Somebody just told me about that place.
That's a really nice place.
Yeah.
We really packed the house, and we hit our first song that we specifically wrote as an opening piece, as part of this larger scale. And we hit it, and you could see people like, wow, these guys are not messing around. And then by like the third song, they were thinking, this is some really good stuff. And then when we finished, like everybody was coming up and being like, are you on the radio? That was such
awesome.
an amazing performance. And then I was so hyped. I went home and I was driving and I was listening to the recordings that we have on my phone. I'm just like, man, it's not the same because we don't have it arranged in that order. There's something really massive that when you put those songs in that correct order, it hits so much harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm putting together set lists is an art. I'm blessed to be a really good performer. I can really feel a crowd. I think I'm just a very sensitive, and I have a lot of empathy.
Yeah.
And so that naturally partly, and I love to see people engaged. So it just naturally makes me a good performer. And I think I've always been pretty good at putting together, and I can always just tell, like if I start a song, I'm like, this doesn't go here. I needed to wait or whatever. But that's cool. That's the Sgt. Pepper thing. It's like, Paul came along and said, why don't we do like an album that has sort of a theme to it? And I think just being that's just cool that you care enough that you actually just even want the music to have like a not cycle, but like an arc.
Yeah.
I was thinking when you were talking about theater, and when you're talking about performing, it's just like being in a play. You work so hard and you rehearse, and it's sometimes it's just like, okay, this is like not fun at all. I'm just like working my lines, or I have to do my blocking. This guy keeps forgetting his lines, whatever. But then when you perform, because I'm also an actor, when you get up on stage and you have the run of the play or the show, whatever, that's like performing as a musician. You're right. Like all the work you put into it, you get to just say, you need to just take all those hats off and just get up there and friggin' play, and just like get the enjoyment of all the work that you've done. If you care about your craft and you have done the work, and all the marketing
important
of yourself and all the things that we do as like DIY musicians. So that just also when you were talking about songs and all needing to have them be in the right place. A guy that gave me a little bit of songwriting help once told me, why is that word there? Like, why is that sentence there? And just always challenging yourself, like, does this line have to be in there? Like, and just like as a writer, and just purely as a writer of a play or a story, it's the same with songs, So it's the same thing with like, why is this song here? Is it supposed to, and being open enough. It's good that I've got the guys working, you guys can all give each other.
Absolutely.
Otherwise you'd be like, nope, this song belongs here. And everyone's like, no, it doesn't really. But like you're by yourself and no one can get in and tell you. So that's
I know
cool.
for a fact that they get tired of me sometimes.
Because you're
too picky to like, especially when it comes to like crowd work, dialogue in between songs. I'm very particular about how long it can go on and how many times you do it.
That's awesome.
But that was a part of the feedback we got at the Al Shebeen show. They said like even the parts where you were just speaking to us seemed so engaged and rehearsed, and I said that's because they were rehearsed.
I know. I mean,
believe it.
I've gotten much better at that. I used to my patter just used to be kind of would sometimes just talk because I thought I should talk, but that's a really important part of a show too. And you're right. The things that really, it's just like how you can be, a 10-year overnight success. The things that go over well are things you've worked on. And that's the whole point. Like you've worked on them. Even the great, because I follow some, a little of the NBA, and even the greatest athletes are always working on their craft and trying to get better. And the stuff that you see them do so effortlessly, it's because they are practicing. I'm a big Tom Brady fan. And he works as hard now as he did, when he first came up. I'm also a fan of his because he's defying age, which I love to do too. But when you so it's the execution, but the execution is fluid because you have worked on it. So yeah, but that's cool that you have that's a throwback. That's like the David Bowie, like you have like almost like a performance piece where you're taking them to a certain place and you're really trying to.
I do consider myself. Humbly, I do consider myself like a full-on performer. I was the front man of the group, the singer. We brought in a new singer just because some of the notes, I have a pretty low range, so it's just rock and roll singing tends to be higher. We brought in a person better suited to singing higher notes,
right? Which
for the good of the sound is an important aspect. But man, if I could, I'd be right up there.
I'm looking forward to hearing your stuff. I wasn't actually, don't think I knew about your band or about the actual concept. I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, I don't tend to show it off just because, like I said earlier, we only have a couple of tracks fully recorded and mixed, so it lacks that punch that I know we can offer.
Yeah.
And so often first impressions are the biggest thing where I'll come up to a musician and be like, yeah, no, we don't have any recordings. Like, I'm hesitant to tell them because
I know
I want them to have a good first experience, preferably like a live show environment.
No, it's when I'm doing Serenade out live now with Vince, and it's great that you recorded it because like people will come up and go, I want that song, and the song they're going to hear is just solo piano. I don't have recording him with it yet, so we're going to go and we're going to re-record it. And I'm going to perform some songs tomorrow night that are brand new and they're not released, and that's the cardinal rule you should never do. But it's like it's an open mic. I just want to have fun and get them on their legs and see. But I know that feeling. You have a song and you're like, I'm sorry, and you really should only do songs that people can get in that form also. But it's still a great feeling when people like your stuff enough that they come up and like, can I, because there's a lot of stuff out there. So if you can get above the noise and above the frame, people can want you. That's pretty rewarding. That's the artists. You make a painting, someone wants to buy it. You write a story, someone wants to read it. You sing a song, and someone wants to listen to it. That's it. That's what art. That's what we're here for.
And in that 1 minute, it like buys you a million minutes more of drive because you feel that, oh wow, that appreciation, and you get hungry, you get greedy for it.
No, that's the aphrodisiac and the intoxication of being successful as an artist, and that is why you think about when I think about Mozart, or I think about Beethoven, or I think about Van Gogh, even Da Vinci. Maybe he was more acclaimed. He seems like he had kind of a lonely life, and the brilliance of them, and the complete, almost complete lack of recognition. And yet they were friggin' using. We are okay swearing, aren't we? Is this Is this E?
Yeah, for sure. A little E.
I was going to use a worse word than that, but I'm trying to speak well. But the F word seems.
We're only human.
Just the fact that they were using manuscript paper, and if they made a mistake, they had to throw the whole thing away and then start all over again, and that they continue to create, and so that's kind of my humility, like. When I get really positive affirmation, it does feed me, but what helps me keep going, even if I haven't gotten it recently, is like, well, you know what? You've gotten more than they ever got in their lifetime, and all you have to do is cut and paste your lyrics if you don't like them, whatever. They were sitting there laboriously, you know what I mean? So,
that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, I always think about how fortunate we are in this day and age to not have to have some of the laborious things that they had to go through. Michelangelo on his back for weeks and weeks and weeks, and hey, how would he know that anybody would ever walk in and like what he did? And just that time period, just all those time periods of times when people were just, you walk around DC and you see the architecture, and a lot of the buildings were made in like the early 1900s, and they all by hand created this, or the National Cathedral, they by hand created these unbelievable little figures, and it's just amazing. and they might not have ever even known that people would come and appreciate them. But they had no machines; those were all hand done, all tools, and it's remarkable to keep going. So just to piggyback on what you said, but yeah, it's when you get that rush of somebody really liking your stuff, it does keep you going. But I feel like we can be appreciative in our age of like, we have computers, we have soft. I don't have to write notes out.
Everything's backed up.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to pay for a printer to copy everything.
I know.
By ink and quill.
Even in the last 10, 15 years, how things have changed. It's pretty remarkable. When I started recording, it was like on ADAT. It was still like on this ADAT, which is like a videotape, and then slowly went to computers and slowly, and they still had some 2-inch reels. One of the studios that still had the reels, and he was like, "Yeah, we used to do this." And I was like, "Oh my god!" He was, "Yeah, we'd cut it, and I'm like, "Wow." But there's a warmth to that you can't get these days. So.
I was fortunate to get a song recorded. It wasn't a song; it was just a drum track. Actually, recorded at the Inner Ear Studio in Arlington, and they had 2. It was a really almost stingy building. A lot of like really dirty Persian rugs everywhere. But like they had 2 totally separate channels, which in the playing recording space, which was the musicians who wanted to do it with all the old like stereo equipment,
right.
And then the musicians who wanted it done just with the computers and stuff.
That's
and they
funny.
had that set up because I think the Foo Fighters actually came to Inner Ear Studios to do the record the song for DC on that whole Sonic Highways thing they did. So, and they did it through the old channel.
That's
so
cool.
I think they might have seen that and realized maybe more musicians will want that.
Well, that's what we were talking.
The pendulum, you mentioned the
I was
pendulum.
gonna say.
We get so electronic. I was talking to you about compressing, like everything's compressed into these little earbuds.
Yeah.
And then it swing, we take that step back and
you're
people remember the value of vinyl and warmth and stuff like that.
No, just the way records have made a comeback. I mean, and you're doing this podcast with your earbuds. You're not even using headphones. I mean, just that is like this woman at Starbucks today paid for something with her watch. I mean, it's I know it's very strange to watch that, but I'm like, yeah, pretty soon we'll just have. Well, I always joke that we're just gonna be born and they're just gonna put chips in us, and we're just gonna scan our arm. We'll just,
I go one further. I think within the next 100 years we'll all just end up being radio waves.
That'll take all the fun out of making babies. Though. Yeah, that's true. That reminds. That's Woody Allen's Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, and he has this machine that people go in to experience an orgasm. Like they don't have like the sex anymore. They just have their own separate little. Yeah, vinyl, and it's cool. When albums started making a comeback, I found that amazing because when I was younger, there still were albums, and just to see albums come back, and of course they're not the same because they're kind of like they're like CDs, but still putting that needle on an album and that experience, and that is the pendulum swinging. And my daughter, who's 18, is always talking about how she can't believe that people don't go outside anymore to play. She remembers when she was 8 or 10 and people were, she remarks on, so her generation, I guess she's a millennial, that this whole generation of people, I think, like you are,
yes,
is
I am.
looking, you're looking, which is why I feel so, I think that people tend to be too cynical. I think that there's a lot of hope for the future because you're looking at what's happening and you're like, okay, how can I use this technology to be creative, and you're enterprising, and you're not necessarily wanting to be checked out or tuned out or on your phone the whole time. And I think there is a natural, maybe it's backlash, just of like when everything's thrown at you, and it's like you literally could just sit in your house all day and never talk to anybody and have you could just exist that way. You'd never have to see anybody. You can order food online.
Yeah.
That you almost think, no, I want to go out and like have a volleyball team. I want to go to a club and listen to music. It's almost like you're going against that. And you find the people actually who are on their phones too much are actually people who are 30 or 40 or 50 or are on Facebook, and you're like, you're the one, you're the ones driving around. My daughter's like super careful.
I feel that it's just one more, not like social class, but there's groups. There always has been groups in modern society, and I think now there is a group of people who appreciate things that take a little more time. Like they appreciate, like for instance, I said this on my last show with Mary. I said I have I went to that store Tivana and just bought one of those handmade cast iron teapots. It takes a process that was so fast, which was just I had the hot water, and it comes out almost instantly, and it's scalding hot, and you just put the tea bag in there, and you make a whole pot of it, and it's glass, and it's the right drinking temperature for about 6 minutes, in between scalding hot and just too cold to be satisfying,
Right.
And it's just never enjoyable. But
Right.
now it's like you get
you can boil it and get
those
it.
handmade little cups, and it keeps the tea at such a great drinking temperature, and you pour out a little of it into the cup, and you drink that, and then the rest stays warm. It takes longer, but it just makes the experience so enjoyable. And I think there's a similar thing to be said with vinyl, maybe like shaving with a straight razor. There's all kinds of things that people are now sort of going back
that's
to
actually, yeah.
because it slows time down. With straight razor shaving, you get to those really hot, moist towels
Yeah,
that you
those
get
are
to
awesome.
feel on your face. Like there is something to be said for slowing things down.
Well,
And what that has become a group of people, and you can see them walking around, and it's a way for like-minded people to connect. Like, I'm sure if I met your daughter, we'd probably immediately connect on that signal. Like, well, yeah, I don't look at my phone if I don't have to. Like, if I'm bored, I'll just tend to people watch or
Right.
look at the birds or something like that. It's just it created another group of people.
Yeah, and I mean that's just so cool to hear because I grew up in a time when things did take a little bit longer, and I love how fast things can be now, and I am guilty just as much as anybody else of if I'm trying to download something, I'm just like, oh, this is taking a little bit of a while, but she'll get really frustrated. I'm like, just appreciate the fact that it's taking 5 seconds
Yeah,
more,
right.
but you're literally getting something within 5 seconds of wanting, But I think that's cool, and I think that's again why I think that live music is really becoming so much more popular again. Because there was a time when it felt like it was kind of like you were either a really big band, a really big act, or you just weren't playing, and there weren't places. But now there's all these places for open mics, and which is what's been great for me as I've gotten back out there. Just all these places you can go, and you can get show opportunities from them, and lots of people are going out and experiencing it. So I think that has to do with what you were saying, and a lot of them are I hate to use categories of people. I think it's devoid of the whole fabric of the whole group of people.
People are complicated.
Yeah. But in general, there are a lot of people in their teens and 20s who are out listening to music, and that's really affirming. And they love what I do, and I'm always just extra affirmed because I'm like, wow, because you're someone who could just be blipping around, and you in 2 seconds you can download 4 million people on your SoundCloud thing or whatever. But the heart of my music and the feel of my music is touching you, and that's why it's just extra affirming to me, actually. So
you're self-taught, which is something that I really admire because I was self-taught not just in my music but in most things of my life. How do you now look back? Because you seem to be in a place right now where you can sort of take a elevated look at the history of your career. Looking at it, how do you see the autodidactation? I'm not going to try that.
that was good. I was looking forward to hearing that.
Autodidactic, self-taught. How do you see that in terms of how it's benefited you? What are some of the biggest things that you've been able to accomplish as a result of doing it purely by your own personal drive?
Well, I think that gets back to the heart of me because I think I'm just playing from the heart. My style on the piano is incredibly relaxed, and so I can play jazz and I can, play ballads, but I can also be very technically proficient if I have to be. That's not really completely an answer. I think it gets back to my heart, and I think that again, I've spent so many years being in front of people thinking that it was about my playing, and it is about my playing, but it's because of me, the way that the magical gift comes through Joshua's hands. Because there are other very gifted musicians who are self-taught, but it's just like the language we talked about and how and I can't think about this for too long because it makes me literally want my head to explode, that there's only really, 12 tones or however many.
Yeah, right.
I can't think about that. But that everybody expresses it, it's an infinite amount of ways that it can be expressed. So I think that as far as just being self-taught and just feeling it and having heart. That's I don't think I could have ever been in a conservatory. I tried to go to the New England Conservatory for about a month, and I was like, I don't want to do this. It's not any fun, and I already know everything that this person's teaching me anyway. And I had a lot to learn, but I mean, I learned it on the job. I think it just goes along with. It's just that, we were talking earlier. It's just that question of like, what comes first, chicken or the egg kind of thing. I'm already somebody who likes to be my own person, and I'm self-taught and I'm entrepreneurial. So that's already there. And then I happen to have this effortless ability to just play. And so it's like, what comes first? And, I think it all dovetails, into itself. I just love the freedom that I have. And, I'll meet people and they're like, oh my God, I was supposed to take lessons and I couldn't stand it. And I had to practice and I'm just so envious of you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm really lucky because nobody, it was the flip side. I wish that my parents had said, wow, you're a prodigy. We need to do something about you. But I never had anybody pushing or anything. I was like, if I don't play, I don't feel alive. So it's kind of necessary for me, actually. I hope that that's kind of an answer.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a good question.
Yeah, it's just so interesting to me. Education is always something that's much on my mind, being that I'm young and all my friends have gone. I've watched them go through the series of education, whether it's private or public or universarial or however.
Right.
But and me not being a part of any of it, I maybe took bass guitar lessons for a year, and then I just thought, I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of this. And,
right.
and I've been playing for 6 years when I joined my first band, because I really wanted to be in a group. That was the dream when you're a kid, right? You want to be a rock star. Not really what I had in mind. I actually joined this band. It was a Pakistani Eastern fusion band where they took ragas, traditional Eastern music theory, and then paired it with Western music stylings,
wow,
such as jazz or reggae. So
sounds like something Paul Simon would have
they
done.
really enjoyed my young enthusiasm because they were older.
Yeah.
And what was so important for me was, for the first time, I was being provided with something that I couldn't do, which is interesting. Like, you cannot, it's almost, I don't know if it's impossible or how different people write different things, but for me, it's really difficult for me to write something that I can't play. It's just naturally difficult to put yourself into a spot where you are inventing something that you can't do. So Saqib and Zoe were challenging me to do something that I didn't have the ability to do. But I guess they must have saw something in me. Probably they thought, I think he can do it if he,
right.
And I was fortunate.
And you were open to it. They could see that.
And so that was a real, culture shock, because not only, they were not singing in English, they were singing in Urdu.
Was it not in 4? It probably wasn't all in 4.
It wasn't all in 4. They taught me time signatures for the first time. Apparently 7 was what the guy Zoe, he learned 7 before he learned 4, which I don't really think is possible, because it's like marching is 4. It's so natural. But anyway, yeah, we did a lot of stuff in 7, a lot of stuff in 9.
I've heard some Indian stuff is in 16. I'm just like,
yeah, they
it's
break it down hugely. Yeah. But
that reminds me of when you said the thing about writing something you can't play. I'm like, I've met musicians and they're just like, yeah, I wrote this part, I wrote this song, and I can't really play it. Like, how can you? So I think you have. And I think I was blessed to be able to teach myself in every situation. I got better, and I was always in a situation where I was like as an accompanist, I was thrown into playing. Somebody would come in, and just the musical theater world is like, singers are famous for having their sheet music in the worst shape ever. Like, it's all taped together.
Yeah.
And you're always like, please just teach these people, like, support yourself, because if you're handing me music I can't really see that well, it's not going to help you. But anyway, and so this woman would come in with like this song, Stephen Sondheim, who's a very, very, very amazing writer, but he's known for very, very tricky melodies and very involved, chord structure and everything. You can't fake Sondheim, really. And they would come in, and his stuff's always in like 7 flats, 6 flats, 5 sharps, like dear God. Like sometimes I think he just writes stuff just to be hard. You know, some singers say that like he just puts that note in there just because he wants to see, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, just these stories where I just remember, you know, a singer would come in, it would be Sondheim. It would already be in six flats. I'm sight reading, and she would say, "Can you just transpose that because I need it to be in a different key?" And the music was all taped, you know. And I would do it. I would get the song where people could like hear her and support her, and that was always like, I loved that. I loved being able to get better every time. And this is to say that I think a musician who's writing something they can't play is, you know, it's like, then learn how to play it. Like figure out, because I think I was also thinking when you were talking, I think it's really important if you are self-taught, maybe this is more of an answer or part of the answer to what you asked before.
Okay.
I think that you ought to learn theory too. And when I finally taught myself theory, and I'll put my theory up against anybody, when I finally learned theory, you know, it opened up mostly to pay the bills. I mean, it gave me an opportunity to get a lot more work because I could read and I could do all that. But just understanding the language foundationally, I don't think you should walk around going, I think I'm going to write something in C major. I think I'm going to write something in this chord. I'm going to use this chord progression. But knowing what's happening foundationally, just like it is a language, I think I think you owe it to yourself as an artist, as in any form that you're in. If you're doing acting, you should learn Shakespeare. If you're doing jazz, you should learn ballet, dance. You know, if you're doing music, I think you should learn music theory. And I think that that's part of like a guy's writing a song. He's like, I can't quite play this. Like, yeah, well, just you need to learn the key you're in, and you need to learn what a scale is, learn the circle of fifths or whatever. So that was what I was thinking of when you were saying that.
Yeah, I think for me it was probably more just the physical aspect, like me moving my fingers that fast. You know, because they need this many notes in this many beats, and I'm just not sure that I had the ability to move my fingers that fast.
Right.
Which is just, you know, an aspect of the bass guitar being that the strings are very thick.
But you were put into that situation and challenged to get better, and you rose to the occasion. I'm talking about the musician who they don't have to write something that they can't play. They could just write something they can't play. But they're just like, I just wrote this piece I can't play. Like, okay.
But it was such an interesting awakening because, for one, it was the first band I ever played in that I felt that they were on my level. Now, of course, they were far beyond my level, but it was also the first group that I was ever in that I performed live with. We actually did the Lisner Auditorium.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty... I'm not sure how we managed to sneak our way onto the set list, but it was pretty remarkable.
That's cool.
And it was also the first time that it really opened my eyes to what's required, obviously, because you're young and you see the end goal. So it really taught me what was required.
Yeah, that was like a major woodshedding experience you got that most musicians wouldn't necessarily get. It's like if you got thrown into playing with like Miles Davis before you even knew your instruments. Like, okay.
For sure.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I think like, because I didn't just have to, and I didn't learn theory when I was a kid. I wanted nothing to do with, you know, it was all tablature.
Yeah, I mean,
but
most people don't want to learn it.
Yeah, if they said play a C, I was like, where is that on the fretboard? It was terrible. Right. Of course, now I know all that. I mean, I still can't sight read, but if you say, you know, if you tell me notes, intervals, modes, scales, I do enough. I was a music teacher at one point, so I know enough to do my job. But on top of that, I had to learn Eastern music theory, which wasn't the same. So I had a scale, you know, I had the scale and key, and then I had the rhythm, and then I had the raga, and the raga is sort of like, it alters the scale to fit a particular emotional state. So, for instance, the only example I can give, because it was the only like test I passed, basically, was we had a song in Rag Jogia, which we would do D. The song was in D double harmonic minor, which was like very, you know, it sounds very Arabian. And then it was in Rag Jogia, which means the scales are altered whether you are ascending or descending. So in order for that emotion to come through, if you let D double harmonic minor go, you know, on its own, it can sort of sound mysterious, and that's not what Rag Jogia is about. Jogia is a very sad rag, so you couldn't hit these notes or these notes, whether you're going up or down, and that was to keep the emotional content very sad. And so I had to learn all of that at the same time in order to play with these guys, and it was really, you know, trial by fire.
Wow.
But just as everything, being, of mine that's self-taught, the first thing I had to do was find I had to find a drive and a passion for it. So I started listening to like Ravi Shankar and stuff like that. And I kind of pulled through long, I got the
It's
hang
like
of
you
it.
were adopted into a different culture and you were like being raised by like another family. You're like, okay, I better learn this language because I have to find out where the
Right.
bathroom is.
They would invite over other Eastern music guys, and we would do. I'd never forget this one. There was 8 of us, and each guy would. It was basically a big jam session, and each musician took turns directing, like basically on the spot composing. So, for instance, this one guy, Noveen, I'm still friends with him. He was singing, and he was like, "I want charade and I want tabla and bass to start." So he would like tell us which rag to start, and I would just say which key, because I didn't know. There's like a lot of rags, so I didn't know them all by heart. So I would just say, "What key is it?" And he'd tell me, and then I'd just try to listen.
For where you fit in.
For where the emotion was going. I could just, so is it whimsical? Is it more happy? Is it like, is it happy in a sort of strange way? And that's where it gets really complicated. And each time the new guy would come up with a new rag, a new everything. And it was just a crazy environment to come up in. But for me on my own journey, that it was so necessary because it let me know, well, what am I getting into? This is what I'm getting into.
I mean, that sounds like just a great learning experience. I forgot what I was thinking when you were saying it, but it reminds me of the ship because the drummer, and I was such a wise ass back then. I just was like so daring, and I just was doing crazy things just to do them. But he taught me a lot, and I mean, and I would just look at the chart, and I was like, wow, okay, you just learn all these things, and I learned how to read charts, and his most famous thing. This isn't anywhere near as complex as the music you were playing, but we had to be together, and it was still it was another woodshedding moment because it was above my level. And he would always say, "I'll meet you at Denny's," and that just meant that no matter where we are in the song, if we end at the same time, that's all that really matters. He always said that. Okay, I'll meet you at Denny's. It was always funny.
Great, man.
But that's a great woodshedding. I was thinking that really parlays into or dovetails into. The pocket, and somebody once told me it's what you don't play that's more important than what you do play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you just listen. And I remember the producer for Billy Joel's River of Dreams. I think it's Korchmar. He also produced Boys of Summer with Don Henley, but he's just a really, really good guitarist, a really good producer. And he talked about creating the pocket. And that's what he would say. It's like, what you don't put in there is just as important. And if you hear a really good band, so you were actually in that context, that's really essentially what you were doing. You were finding the pocket of what you were supposed to. And good musicians who listen, that's what they do best.
In more than just one way, because I was actually explicitly taught. Saqib is a very advanced drummer, and he would tell me, he would say, if you hear me start playing something and you want to join in, I need the first thing for you to do is to just listen and just stop. So that's to this day the first thing I ever do when I meet up with a drummer, no matter how amateur the drummer is. I listen where are the bass drum hits,
right?
Where is his patterns going with his fills? Does he tend to do more tom, more snare,
right?
So yeah.
And that's if more musicians would just listen, especially drummers, because the drummers tend to be the ones that are just like they're banging really loud, and you're just like. It's so important for them, especially to be lit. And the best drummers are the ones, first of all, usually the ones who play other instruments, including piano.
Yes.
But the ones that just listen. I've had the good fortune to play with a couple of really, really fine percussionists, and that's what it was. I mean, this one guy I used to play with, and I would teach him the song, and he would just do nothing. I would always be like, "Why are you just sitting there?" And he would literally just sit there and he wouldn't even play. He would just listen and listen and listen, and then he would, and he always came up with the best parts. And I was like, "Wow!" And that's. Listening is and we were talking about how people don't listen to each other and they jump into each other's.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the language of music. So it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I'm expressing something with my instrument. Again, there's an infinite amount of ways to express this, even though we could all play I Saw Her Standing There, but it would still be, everybody would do it just that little bit different. So how am I doing it? And just listening to that particular person expressing their language through their instrument. And it's like a respectful thing too.
Yeah, respect is important because if you are going in with a preconceived notion of how good you are, what you're going to do with somebody else's expression, then you can often miss the point entirely. I remember auditioning for like a big, like 9-piece like P-Funk orchestra because I loved Parliament and Commodores growing up.
That
Funkadelic
stuff is really good. They talk. Speaking of tight musicians who hear the pocket.
Oh, absolutely. And that was one thing. They were like, "We're not." You're very enthusiastic and you're very talented. We appreciate that, but you don't have the ability to pay attention to what's going on around you. And that was a real, that was a dagger because I really wanted to.
But that was
sounded so cool. But that was a great lesson. And to this day, no matter how simple the piece is, I always try to give it as much breathing room as possible and as much malleability for my parts.
Well, I always say I stole this completely, but I stole it from Bikram Yoga because they say if you fall out of a posture, you're human, but if you get back into a posture, then you're a yogi. So I changed that to if you make a mistake in music, you're human, but if you get back and try to do it right, the next time you're actually a musician. And I think that you had a dagger and you used it and you got better. It's the people who don't use it to get better that don't become the musicians. That to me is what really being a craftsman or craftswoman is. You care about doing it right and getting it better. Making the mistake just means you're human. So
you are self-taught. How did you go about doing that when you began singing? Because singing is an interesting thing in the sense that you are using in most people, a very underdeveloped set of muscles that are very, it's hard to access them directly. Like you can manipulate them through mental pathways, but it's hard to just say like, close your larynx. Like most people just don't have the ability to do that.
Right.
So how did you go about, what steps did you take in order when you realized you're like, I like to sing, I love to sing with these songs, and I think it's important that I have a powerful, healthy voice. How did you go about doing that? Because I was a former vocal coach. So
right. I remember you telling me.
Stuff interests me.
And I remember when I was performing, you were talking about me standing straighter. It's like, oh, that's right. I mean, I have several things to say. One of them is that I've taken longer to become confident as a vocalist than I really probably needed to become, which reminds me of the famous story I always tell of my dad who was just so hard on me. And I remember playing once for him, and I always was just like, I'm totally self-taught, so can you at least just give me a little bit of credit, even if I make a mistake? Because he played the sax too, and I remember one time we were playing, and I just changed the key. It was just a silly thing to do, and he literally just yelled at me, "You don't just change a key." I'm like, but still, I'm totally But I remember once he told me, like, you need to develop your own style. You really need to, and because I was still, listening and learning, and so all my life I've always wanted to, have my own style, and I remember always wanted to show him that, and it was before he passed away, which I didn't know at the time, but it was like towards the end of his life. And I remember playing for him, and it was sort of the beginning of me starting to really feel confident. And I was like, so do I have my own style? He was like, oh yeah, you've had your own style for years. It's just so funny how we look for our dads and stuff like to do that.
Right.
But that also reminds me of singing. And I remember specifically I would sing and I could hear it, and I knew I wasn't really singing as strong as I wanted to. And I just taught myself, and I just remember sitting in my car and just saying, I'm just going to sing all the time. And that's what I tell people who are trying to learn how to sing. Just sing. And I remember driving, and every time I'd be in my car, I'd listen to the radio. Every time I was on the floor and I could listen to albums, I would just sing and sing and sing. And like I said, I've since seen that my voice has been stronger for longer than I've known it is. But I have learned how to use it. I'm actually still finding things in my voice that I'm discovering, but I have a certain baseline of knowledge of what I can do. I am excited because I'm discovering new things still, but it was in that same context of being self-taught. I just really love to sing, and I've been blessed with a unique voice. I don't really sound like anybody else per se, and I have my own real kind of sound, and so I'm glad about that. And it's been just like sort of forming it over the years, just like piano. I mean, I've always been naturally gifted at it, but I've had to get my chops to a point where I felt really on top of my craft, which is where I feel now with piano. And now I feel that way with vocal, but it's in the same vein. It's just, I've done vocal coaching, and I've done a ton of accompanying, and I've done a bunch of musical theater and musical direction. So I learned a lot of, again, I taught myself a lot about the voice and about breathing and diaphragm and opening your mouth and all that stuff. But the essential part of it, like you were talking about, that you can't really just naturally just do, is just that kind of like learning to just be in touch with how I want to express a song. And that's one thing about the Beatles. When you listen to the Beatles, I don't know if many people really notice this. Not so much with Elton, definitely with Billy to some degree, is they did a lot of, and I want to go and talk to them and ask them, there's so many less people now, you can't even talk to George Martin anymore, that did they think about it? Because you hear them doing character voices. Like they would do certain sounds of their voice with certain songs, and then other ones, like they might sound more rocky, sometimes they'd sound more tender, sometimes they'd have a certain way, and then, not just the effects, but just the way they, and I think about that. I don't really do that, but I always think I want to, but I just have my voice, and that's why I was saying, but sometimes they'd be more clipped, sometimes, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. That's a tangent. Just going on a Beatles tangent.
No, it's fine. So, how do you see your immediate future going in terms of like goals? You seem to be pretty well established at this point to kind of find a good jumping off point to get your reach out. So, what is in the immediate future for you?
Right. Well, now that I'm able to really focus on this full time, it's interesting because I'm synthesizing everything that I have been able to put together, because I've spent my whole life performing and recording, but I call it going underground. I call it, I have like my Elvis years. I always say I went into the army at like the peak of his career. Muhammad Ali very bravely protested the war and gave up 3 years of his career. So I'm just giving a long answer. So I'm happy to now be able to be full-time at this. And it's funny to me because it's not that I just started, but in a way it feels like I just started. So that's the preface to say that I want to continue synthesizing everything, that I've learned and accomplished, and just keep building the name that I'm trying to build and sharing who I am and what I do with the world, and just continue to put it in God's hands to let myself be more and more discovered, so that I can get to the point where I'm able to do this all the time without any pressure of any other financial pulls, basically, where I can be paid to be an artist full time. That's really my goal.
Yeah, so that's the dream.
Yeah.
Now, I just wanted to touch earlier that you just mentioned to put it in God's hands. Now, I still don't know you a whole lot, but you don't strike me as an exceptionally religious person. So
Right.
in what manner are you do you mean that
I don't greet you with the Bible when you walk in and say, "Be saved, young man."
do you think that God will provide you with the opportunity, or maybe that he will provide you with the ability to seize the opportunity when it comes? How do you see his influence?
Well, my relationship with God is very different than one might think it would be. I wear a cross. I've always worn a cross, although I was raised Jewish, although my parents didn't actually bar mitzvah me.
Okay.
Which is a whole nother story, that they just rejected their religion. But by blood, I'm Jewish, but I've always felt connected to God. And I've had things happen to me in my personal life that prove to me that there's something more than just us, just amazing miracles and just an energy I've always felt tapped into, that I've always prayed to. And I don't look at it like a person sitting up on a hill, or on the sky judging. I really think that God is like this collective energy that we all are part of and we're all contributing to. And so all of the good that we contribute to it adds to the good, and all of the bad that we contribute to it adds to the bad. And it's sort of like, the best balance is when there's more good than bad, in my opinion. And so when I say God, I think I'm just like, I'm calling to that collective energy of like, any good energy out there, I'm putting myself in you and asking for you to help, bring to me what I am seeking. It's kind of the same parallel as universal law. And it's interesting because things that Jesus said work just like the law of attraction. If you take some of his quotes, they work just exactly with the law of attraction, as far as he would say things like, ask and ye shall receive. And there's a lot of parallels. So there's a real spiritual underpinning to the law of attraction, as well as the fact that it's physically quantifiable, that energy begets, like energy begets like energy. So that's, so I have a very, I don't think you can look at the world and be so arrogant. I just think I don't know how somebody can look at the world and think that there isn't something more than our humanness, but I don't think that God is above us as far as we're like these underlings, and he's, and I don't even know if it's a he. I just, to me, it's this collective, like I was saying, it's just like a collective energy, but it's spiritual, and it's definitely important, and it's something to be revered and respected, because we don't know why we're here or how we got here. And until somebody can say something else, to me, it just seems like there's some unbelievable, incredible collective energy that's beyond our brains to comprehend, that created this absolutely perfect, idyllic world and people and just, this amazing kind of reality we're in. So
first of all, this is a really great topic, but I just want to say that sounds an awful lot like the internet. Just like at the heart, the internet is the sum total of all human information and experience.
It's just funny that, you reduce it all to the net, which is funny. Everything gets reduced to being online at some point.
Yeah. Well, it's like,
not real unless it's online. So.
It's like a morally just version of the internet, because it's unfortunate that the internet, in all of its universality, like its
right.
glory of being able to reach anybody that has that connection, more and more we're seeing the reduction of that access through like we were just talking about how good Facebook is at making sure that the only ads and stuff that pop up on your wall are the things that they know you will like.
Right.
Like you lose an entire commentary from political discussions, world disciplines, and you just doesn't even filter through to you. And that's unfortunate. Okay,
that's true.
The second thing I wanted to say is I think that, I was not raised religious by any means. I think my dad was raised Catholic. My mother was Lutheran, but it didn't have a lasting effect on either of them. And when we were young, my brother and my sister and I think my mom recognized that in school we would be interacting with kids who would be raised Christian or other religions, what have you.
Right.
And I think she knew that we needed some ammunition to go into that situation with. So every Sunday she had what was called spirit class. And we were taught the law of attraction. We were taught about a universal energy field. And it seems very reasonable. And I'm very proud to be completely, there's no standoffishness about how I perceive the vastness of existence, as I like to call it. I think religion is the logical attempt at explaining the vastness of existence, the vastness of the world that we live in. So I have no problem involving myself in any regard with somebody who thinks that there is something more, because I think, just like you said, anybody who thinks in their mind that they can put a stamp on that problem and close that file, I think is just naive at this point. I have a couple thoughts. One, I tend to agree more with scientific theory, but there is still scientific theory, part of the scientific formula that is quite strange, like subatomic particles. When you look into a molecule, you see the atom, and you look into the different neutrons, electrons, protons, you look inside of them, you get subatomic particles which flash out of existence and appear in other observable spaces. So there is still a great vastness that we don't understand. And until then, I think it's folly to claim any one direction. So you think in your life that putting out into this field allows you to draw from it positivity and whatever you're looking for in order to help your life progress in any direction.
Right.
Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah, I guess it would be like going online and trying to, access something that you're looking for help with. I guess you could look at it that way. I have a few thoughts while you were talking. I'll go backwards.
Please do.
The last thought I had was the particles never end. That you can never find the beginning of the atom, and that to me is again proof of something beyond us. And what created the atom. So even if you want to look for scientific theory, one, I think, has to be humble enough to, acknowledge that there's still something that created scientific theories or created the science that we're trying to use to explain our existence. I also was thinking that I don't feel like I look to God to explain, because you said something about you have no problem using religion to explain our existence. To me, it's more it seems to be a reasonable not explanation, but a reasonable reality to accept and tap into. I was also thinking about magic and how people are afraid to believe in magic, and I believe in magic, and I don't mean the dark arts. I just believe that there's just such magical things that happen all the time, and I think that if you're open to seeing and believing in magic, you get to say, okay, I'm going to pray for something really great today, and it's like being a little kid and having that imagination of like a song I wrote called "Set Ourselves Free," and I say, remember in the sandbox when anything was possible. The clouds could be an elephant, the sky was blue ice cream. And it's just about how we didn't limit ourselves, and then we get older and we begin to limit. And so when you were talking about explaining, I was just thinking, I'm not using it as sort of like, okay, well, this is, and then the first thought I had at the very beginning was, well, there's two. One is that I resonate with a lot of different religions. I would say that I'm spiritual, not religious.
Yeah.
But the Unitarian Universalist movement has a lot to it that's very spiritual and very open. And I kind of resonate with that religion. I resonate with the Buddhist religion. I resonate with the Christian religion to some degree, as far as the love of it, as far as what Christ was teaching, just as Martin Luther King Jr. taught, and just as John Lennon would say in some of his songs. I mean, to me, anything that's about love and being helpful and giving. So it is, I never really thought about what I really do mean when I say I'm praying. And my daughter sometimes asks me that too. It's not like I don't believe in sitting and putting my hands together. I don't really ever do that. I'm always talking. I'm always in relationship with this energy that I'm calling God. And it's kind of like going into the bank of all of that energy and saying, I humbly ask for help with this. And if it doesn't work exactly the way that I want it to work, then it just means that either it's not meant to be, or that is just not what's supposed to be happening. And it doesn't mean I stop believing in God. It just means that I just accept that everything's in its right timing, and sometimes things don't happen. So people say in this business that sometimes it's what you say no to that's more important than what you say yes to. Sylvester Stallone said that. You never know what no you say that ends up being better than a yes that you might have said. So, you might find out later, well, that kind of prayer didn't come true. But I'm just saying all this because I know that people have like a sort of an immediate like defense mechanism when it comes to religion, and that's
almost why I wanted to unpack this theory.
I figured, yeah.
I didn't want people to listen to an hour and 10 minutes of just like, a brilliant musician discussing his life and then turn it off because, many people have preconceived notions that religious people are very naive and blind and yada, yada, yada.
I mean, I've always been, I have another song called Jesus. I was a teenager and I had these people that would follow me, and I had this girlfriend and she called me Jesus, and it sounds.
Did you just say you were a cult leader?
I know it sounds kind of odd when you say it. It was just like this nice no, but I was going to say that in high school, I was very much of everybody, but not in anything. Like I knew everybody. I was comfortable in every clique. Everybody knew me. I was really popular, but I wasn't trying to be. I was, everybody knew of me, and I was I could be in any group. I could be with the athletic people. We called them the jocks. I could be with, the stoners. I could be with the brainy people, whatever. And they all felt comfortable with me. And that was the sort of leadership that girl saw in me. And that's how I've always been in my life, of kind of this leader, not kind of, but a leader. And that's what I see in my music, that I think God has given me this gift in order to lead. Some people have said that it's almost like a ministry, like they feel like I'm just bringing them, forth. And there's definitely a spiritual component to it all.
Anyway. I definitely feel that you do meet people in your life, and you do feel certain, certain grand, a grand aspect about them. And I think that all of us can say that we've met people and thought nothing of them and passed through, and that's the end of it. But you do sometimes meet people who seem very extraordinary. Part of the reason why I had you on is just like I could just hear. I think the first discussion we had, I was maybe suggesting that some of your high notes could be cleaner if you stopped leaning forward.
Right.
And you took it so humbly, and you then just kind of assumed that I was this talented guy, which was very kind. But like in that one exchange, I immediately got the feeling that there was a lot of substance to this individual. So I think there is, and just to track back a bit, I think that in regards to magic, I find that there is everything about the way that nature conducts its business is magical. When I was a kid, I was really bummed that dragons didn't exist. And then I remember, it was just like a couple months ago, I was like,
That's so
wait,
sweet.
I was like, what's not exceptional and exciting about a lion? Like lions and griffin eagles, like those are exciting animals.
Right.
I don't need dragons.
Yeah.
Like, so I tend to be sort of overwhelmed just by the natural process itself.
That's
And
kind of like a natural high. That's kind of like finding a way to be high just on what's real.
high on oxygen
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
cool.
so when I meet people like you, I almost think that like if we were still, I tend to like look through the lens of like hunter-gatherer societies a lot. And I think if we were a hunter-gatherer society, there's every chance you would be the friggin' cult leader. Like you're just really charismatic.
Thank you very much. That's really, I love hearing that. I'm learning that more about me every day, so that's cool. And I want to be, because I do love to lead, and I love to entertain, and so that's cool. I appreciate that.
So what have you got any projects immediately coming up? Or
yeah, I mean, I'm recording, so I don't know if I said this already. I was talking about all these songs I have that are like little kids. Some of them have been raised and they've been let out of the house, and some of them are still in the house waiting, and they like
love that analogy.
Yeah, they get excited when I come home. They're like, am I getting up today? I'm like, sorry, guys. And then some of them are still in the embryo stage where I haven't really finished them. So I'm getting about the business of either re-recording some pieces, because I brought other instruments in now with me.
Okay.
And they sound fuller, and I want to get I always want to get out a recording that is similar to what they've seen, what someone's heard on stage, which is just a practical thing to do. It's smart. And then I have all the new material that I'm recording, and then I have a lot of material that is from a long time ago all the way up through today that are pieces of songs that I need to finish. Like I just wrote 6 songs 2 nights ago or 3 nights ago, and like felt really good. Get them unearthed and start performing them and get them on their legs. And so as far as projects, it's just like to record, keep performing. And my goals for the new year are to get radio airplay, terrestrial radio airplay.
Okay.
More booking support, more agents helping to book me, or just attracting more booking agents, or a booking agent that's at a higher level. And just more professional kind of level of performing as far as earning more money from it, and just increasing the ratio of more performing income versus, the income that I get from the music teaching and all the stuff I do now. And just kind of raising the level of the professionalism of where I'm performing. Those are my goals for 2017.
So how many people can you, like, if you needed to, say you have 3 weeks,
right,
and you wanted to hype a performance up, how many people could you draw with your reach to a performance over like 3 weeks?
It's always so hard to say, as you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so hard to know why people come out. And sometimes you'll be right down. Like I have a friend who literally lives down the street from a club I played at, and he didn't come see me. I'm like, wow, it would literally take him about 100 steps to walk into the club. Like, oh my God. I think I probably have somewhere between like 25 and 50 that I know for sure, if I really hounded people and worked on people and kept saying, I could probably get them out. But it depends on the location,
Yeah.
So my goal is really, that's why terrestrial radio to me is so important. I need to get vehicles where people can see and hear me on a much larger scale, so that my draw can increase, so that I can then go to the clubs where I want to be playing, where I want to be making more money, and have the draw that justifies that. So that's my overall goal is just to increase my draw to the point where I can do this full time.
I was in a heavy metal band when I was a kid, and we would do shows.
That's where you're getting your Rush. You got your Rush things out of
a bit. No, this was post Rush.
Yeah.
But
you said that was somebody that influenced you when you were growing up.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, in that band, I might as well, like, that's, I did a lot. I didn't do a lot of like just pedaling on one notes. I would do a lot of different scales and things just to keep it lively, because we were only 3 players, and in a metal band you just need so much sound. So I was looking for a way to make it more dynamic. Cool. But we did shows all over Virginia and DC, and one thing that helped us a lot was we were able to get some really good shows by saying we can absolutely draw like 30 people.
Right.
We can if you book us on this show, we can guarantee 30 people.
Right.
So we were able to contact places like the Fillmore or the National in Richmond and be like, we can pull 30 people for sure. Put us as, on the undercard for a band that was coming, like a tour, like a national act. I think that might be a really good way of trying to.
I'm starting to do that, and opening acts, and splitting bills. Like I met this Justina Johnson, who deserves every plug she can get. Is just an incredibly talented singer, gorgeous, wonderful person, great-hearted, and we've become friends, and we've done some shows together, and she just really helped connect me to things. And she's really smart about. She puts together a lot of shows where her band, which is called Lato, Lato. And she just does all these showcases where these other bands come, and she hosts open mics, and she's very much about the community, and that's really a smart way also to say, like I can approach a coffee house or I can approach a club or wherever and say, I'll bring 4 acts in, we'll each draw whatever, and then so that's another way. That's another really good way to do it, and right. So I will be exploring all of those things.
Yeah, because it's not like the old days. There was very linear back then. There's so many different avenues, channels that you can try to use to achieve a goal of being paid to perform full time.
Well, I mean, the other thing I had this thought while you were talking. The other reason that I feel like I'm starting anew is because I haven't stayed in one area long enough to build my name, and now I finally am.
Interesting.
That's another reason. Yeah, I've always, I was in California and starting to do well in San Francisco, and then met a girl. I went to LA. Then things sort of were happening there, and I came back east, and I had a daughter. I mean, it's kind of like I've always sort of sabotaged myself, and so this is a time where there's no more sabotage. It's like, okay, I'm out there. I'm going to continue to be out there. So I'm specifically staying in the DC area just to have, because some of it, 90% of it really, is just be around long enough where it's like, oh yeah, I know what Coca-Cola is. I see that every day. Coke. That's right. Coke.
Yeah.
Coke. Oh, I know Coke.
Yeah.
Oh, Joshua Rich. So, and it's starting to happen. But to me, everything we're talking about is all important, but it just, the essence, the beginning of it all is just like be in the same area for as long as it takes for it to finally build somewhat of a name. The likes are great. YouTube video likes and views are great, but the realness of really becoming an artist who's really known at all, and everybody I've talked to in the business at every level has always said, start local, build your name, get a buzz, and then bring that somewhere else. Don't try to be like, I'm going to go make it and be famous in New York, or I'm going to go make it and be, just build a name. And so that's really my main goal, is just like stay put, don't find another distraction, stay focused, and build my presence in the area, because that's like, you're local and you've been around, and so part of it is just like, yeah, you went to high school here, you have friends, I don't have those sort of things that I've built on.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But I'm building now, and it's exciting. It's happening. It's cool. I get to start over. I get to be like the Benjamin Button artist. It's like everything in my life is going backwards.
Backwards.
Yeah.
Well,
by the end of this interview, I'm going to be like a little kid. Is that what happens? Yeah, he went backwards.
So you seem like a guy who would have a closing thought. I feel like it's a good time to end, but I feel like you are the kind of person who has some parting inspiration for our listeners.
Thanks. Well, I like to think that the things that I say have meaning for people, just like my entertaining and my music. I would say that anybody listening that, has a dream or thinks of things that they want to go for, and they either think it's too late or they think that they wouldn't be good enough at it, or whatever the reasons are, instead of thinking about what they don't want to do, I encourage people to think about what they do want to do. Instead of what you're saying no to, think about what you're saying yes to, and allow the doors to open, and they will. And you may not be a professional at it, but you might just do it on the side or whatever. But feed your spirit as your spirit's calling you to be fed, as your spirit is calling to be fed. And the other thing I would say is that it's really not how you start, it's how you finish. It's really about where you want to get to. And my life has taken a lot of turns and bumps and ups and downs. I have to cough for a second, sorry. Excuse me. I was waiting for the dump button.
Yep.
And yet I'm still here, and I'm still feeling really happy and positive. And so when you are feeding the spirit the way it's calling to be fed, remember that the idea is to focus on what you're trying to get, not where you are currently necessarily, while you should still enjoy the journey. It's just to say that my song I wrote recently called Better Late Than Never, which is just, as long as they're all cheering when the curtain starts to fall, better late than never at all. So those would be the two main things I would say, tying it into a song as usual.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Big kiss. Mwah.